What began as a faint whisper behind Windsor's closed doors is now threatening to shake the very stones of Balmoral Castle. An offhand remark overheard by a loyal courtier has sparked a royal wildfire, one that traces back to a private document bearing King Charles's seal and a signature made under candlelight. But why was this act done in silence? And why now, just before spring? Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. In the hidden corners of Windsor, where quiet footsteps echo louder than spoken words, a single moment of carelessness unraveled the palace's best-kept secret. A trusted courtier, long accustomed to guarding silence, caught fragments of a conversation that were never meant for uninvited ears. Sir Clive Alderton's steady voice, Queen Camilla's tremor, and the unmistakable tension carried by the phrase, "the Balmoral situation." It was enough to send a ripple of unease through the inner circle, because Balmoral is never mentioned lightly. It is not merely a residence, it is the monarch's refuge, a sanctuary carrying the emotional weight of generations. And yet, the tone of the conversation suggested crisis, not comfort. As the courtier retreated into the shadows, one truth became undeniable. Something about Balmoral had shifted, and not in a way anyone expected. Every passing day only worsened the quiet storm. Senior courtiers began to notice unusual delays in Balmoral's traditional spring preparations, delays that made no logistical sense. For decades, protocols had been executed with flawless timing. Groundskeepers dispatched, staff transitioned northward, inventories updated, and seasonal transitions handled with precision. But this year, nothing aligned. Orders stalled. Authorizations lagged. Communications slipped into an uncomfortable silence. At first, these disruptions were dismissed as administrative complications, the kind that often accompany royal transitions. But as the inconsistencies stacked higher, loyal staff whispered among themselves. Were these delays accidental or intentional? Tension thickened further when a sealed envelope emerged in the hands of a senior aide, its wax imprint unmistakable. Estate transition. Appendix Windsor IV. No one knew when the envelope had been prepared, nor who had authorized its movement, but it was seen being taken discreetly from Windsor to Clarence House under strict instructions. The mere existence of such a document introduced a chilling possibility that decisions regarding Balmoral had already been made behind closed doors, far from the reach of those who traditionally safeguarded the estate. And that alone was enough to send shockwaves through departments built on structure, hierarchy, and certainty. Yet perhaps the most telling moment came when Queen Camilla was spotted leaving King Charles's study. Her expression caught between disbelief and fury. Palace, staff, trained to ignore emotion, could not overlook the unmistakable signs of distress. A hurried gait, tightened lips, a gaze fixed on the floor as though searching for equilibrium. Whatever had transpired inside that room had shaken her, and Camilla is not a woman easily shaken. Rumors ignited almost instantly. Had Charles made a unilateral decision regarding Balmoral without her knowledge? Had something been signed, sealed, or transferred in secrecy? And if so, to whom? Those whispers soon solidified into murmurs, and the murmurs grew into a quiet royal panic. Insiders began to suggest that Balmoral's ownership, long assumed to remain fully under King Charles's control, might now be shifting toward another pair of royal hands. For the first time in decades, Balmoral's future seemed uncertain, surrounded not by public declaration, but by shadows, secrecy, and a king's unspoken motive. But as the murmurs grew louder, one figure was already preparing to confront the truth behind Balmoral's silent transfer, Prince William. He received the call just past midnight, an encrypted line from a royal aide who never breaks protocol. William's heart sank as the word Balmoral echoed on the other end. By dawn, he was standing in front of his father's study, where secrets are kept and destinies rewritten. The silence in Windsor Castle was unnerving as William waited, jaw clenched, heart pounding with a cocktail of suspicion and foreboding. He had long sensed something was brewing behind closed doors, but nothing had prepared him for the reality that now hovered in the air like a storm cloud. A discreet voice had warned of a sensitive royal property adjustment. Words vague enough to mask chaos, yet sharp enough to wound. And there was only one property in the entire royal portfolio that required such covert phrasing: Balmoral. His mother's haven, his grandmother's stronghold, his own quiet sanctuary. It was never meant to change hands in this manner. Not silently. Not without a word from the throne. The confrontation that followed was anything but theatrical. There were no raised voices, no dramatic accusations, just silence, tension, and eyes that said everything. Charles stood by the window, visibly aged, deliberately avoiding his son's questions with half-answers and elusive phrases. He spoke of continuity, of timing, of the burden of heritage. But when William asked him directly, "Is Balmoral no longer yours?" Charles offered nothing but a quiet gesture toward a side table, where a thin, cream-coloured folder lay waiting. On it, in unmistakable handwriting, were the words, "Inheritance, seasonal preemption." That was the moment William understood, not through explanation, but through the weight of what had been left unsaid. It was done. Balmoral had been deeded. To him, he opened the folder with hesitant hands, expecting something ceremonial, something celebratory. But what greeted him was cold, clinical legal phrasing, statutory citations, and a notarized signature bearing his father's full royal title. It wasn't a gift. It was a transfer. Silent, immediate, irrevocable. William's breath caught as he read the line that changed everything. Effective immediately, custodianship of the Balmoral estate is assigned to HRH, the Prince of Wales, in perpetuity, under Clause 3B of the Highland Asset Sovereignty Act. The gravity crushed him. No speech, no warning, no public decree, just ink on paper and a legacy handed down like a secret weapon. And yet, the weight was not triumph, it was confusion. Why in secret? Why now? What was his father running from? The silence between them was more deafening than any argument they'd ever had. Charles spoke at last, but only in fragments. He hinted at Scottish sentiment, national turbulence, and whispered obligations tied to the monarchy's survival. It was clear that Balmoral was not merely a gift, it was a shield, a calculated move in a larger game, and William was now both heir and pawn, emotions twisted within him. Gratitude for his father's trust collided with a gut-deep anxiety about the cost of this trust. A castle on paper, but a kingdom of questions in reality. He left the study with the folder clutched tight, stepping into the mist of a new dawn where nothing looked the same. While William grappled with the implications, Camila was already mobilizing forces to undo what she called a grave mistake. She believed Balmoral was hers to safeguard. It was the Queen Mother's retreat, a royal matriarch's paradise. But in the shadows of this surprise transfer, Camila senses betrayal not just by Charles, but by the very institution she thought she had tamed. And Camila doesn't back down quietly. The moment word reached her that Balmoral had been deeded without her knowledge, Camilla's reaction was immediate and unrelenting. She summoned her inner circle to Clarence House under the guise of a private council. But behind those heavy doors, the mood was anything but diplomatic. Legal advisors pored over the transfer documents, dissecting clauses with the urgency of a palace under siege. At the heart of their findings was a single, archaic provision buried within a forgotten statute: spring sovereign transference. A clause so obscure that it had never been used in the modern royal era, it granted the reigning monarch the right to preemptively shift custodianship of royal estates before the vernal equinox, provided no public declaration was made until the next official calendar session. Charles had used it like a scalpel, clean and precise, to remove Balmoral from any immediate dispute. Camila was incandescent, not simply because she had been excluded from the decision, but because of what it symbolized. Balmoral wasn't just a summer escape, it was a symbol of royal permanence, a holdout from a fading empire. And in her eyes, it had been snatched from her grasp, carved away by legal trickery and silence. She immediately sought an audience with the Lord Lyon, King of Arms, the highest authority on heraldic and noble matters in Scotland, and demanded a full assessment of the title transition. If the transfer could be challenged on ceremonial or lineage grounds, Camilla would use every ounce of royal tradition to do so. But her reach didn't stop there. Privately, she reached out to Scotland's First Minister, invoking quiet constitutional concerns about unilateral estate control by the Crown. She knew that stirring nationalist sentiments could generate just enough pressure to question the legality of such a sudden transition, and she was willing to use that pressure to stall or even reverse the move. Behind palace gates, her fury boiled into confrontation. She accused Charles not only of betrayal but of deception, of bypassing her influence in a matter of grave symbolic importance. Their once carefully curated public image as a united royal couple fractured behind the veil of protocol. He had not just ignored her counsel, he had excluded her from the conversation entirely. But Camilla, as always, knew how to weaponize silence. She made no public statement. There were no press leaks. Instead, she acted. One by one, seasonal events scheduled at Balmoral charity picnics, guest retreats, and annual walkabouts were quietly cancelled. It was a signal. She would not recognize this transfer. She would not play host to a castle she no longer claimed. And through absence, she announced war. Yet as Camilla sought to reverse the tides, someone unexpected stepped in, an iron-willed royal with Balmoral in her blood. Long before Charles inked the deed, Princess Anne had begun documenting irregularities at Balmoral old title deeds, forgotten codicils, and inheritance records buried beneath a false wall in the library. She knew something was coming, and now her ledger may hold the key to why Charles acted in haste. For months, Anne had been quietly combing through historical estate files, disturbed by what she believed were contradictions in the custodianship timeline. Balmoral's paper trail, once thought to be as unbreakable as the Highland rock it stood upon, was littered with curious gaps. Purchase orders from Queen Victoria's era didn't align with the archival inheritance transitions signed during Edward VIII's short reign. Codicils to George VI's estate conflicted with amendments drafted during Elizabeth II's Platinum Jubilee. What began as curiosity soon turned to concern something wasn't right. And Anne, the most disciplined of the Windsors, couldn't let it go. Her investigation reached a turning point when she stumbled upon a clause buried deep within the Sovereign Estate Act of 1905, an outdated yet still legally binding statute that dictated conditions for the retention of royal lands on Scottish soil. The clause stated that if a sovereign died without publicly confirming a successor custodian to Highland estates, the procestos, Scottish government could, under pressure from Parliament, force a partial redistribution of royal holdings for public use. The implications were staggering. Anne realised that Balmoral's legal standing was not as airtight as the family believed. It wasn't just about heritage anymore, it was about vulnerability. The very land they walked on as children, the forest they hunted through with their father, the place where their mother found peace, was now tangled in laws written for a monarchy under siege. But there was more. Tucked within a Victorian-era account ledger, Anne found a reference to an obscure title, Keeper of the Highland Reigns. A ceremonial designation never enacted, it carried the power of emergency stewardship over Balmoral, originally drafted by Victoria herself in fear of future instability. The title had never been activated, until now. Quietly, Charles had pulled the thread, enacting a forgotten mechanism to push the estate directly to William, bypassing traditional parliamentary review. When Anne confronted her brother, she wasn't angry, she was haunted. Haunted by the idea that Charles, who had always fought to preserve the monarchy's dignity, would resort to using shadows and secrecy. But Charles didn't deny it. He admitted what Anne feared most. Not only had he used the clause, but he had done it because time was running out, not just politically, personally. Anne pressed him further. Was this about succession? Was Scotland's quiet nationalist wave now strong enough to threaten the estate? Charles didn't answer directly, but his face told the truth. Anne left that room without a word, holding a leather-bound journal of her findings close to her chest. Her mind replayed their childhood walks across the moor, where they chased deer and secrets, never imagining that Balmoral would one day become a battlefield of legality and legacy. And just as Anne began to unearth these long-buried truths, Scotland's government delivered a quiet but seismic letter to the palace. It arrived unannounced on thick paper, sealed with the Scottish thistle crest, and carrying a tone sharper than steel. The First Minister's words were clear. The Crown's unchecked ownership of Highland estates is no longer viable. What began as a familial gesture now risked becoming a constitutional crisis. The moment that letter touched the polished desk at Clarence House, the mood inside the palace shifted from private conflict to public alarm. Behind the composed facades of royal aides and advisors, panic simmered. The transfer of Balmoral had not just bypassed tradition, it had ignited the suspicions of a devolved government already bristling under centuries of English dominance. The First Minister accused the Crown of deliberately enacting a secretive land shift without parliamentary transparency, invoking legal language usually reserved for emergency declarations. The wording was meticulous, but the threat was unmistakable. Scotland was watching, and it would not remain silent. As word of the letter spread through senior royal channels, the implications became terrifyingly clear. Parliament in Edinburgh hinted at launching a full investigation into the sovereign estate portfolio, a move that would put Balmoral, Sandringham, and other Crown-owned properties under political scrutiny. But Balmoral wasn't just a castle, it was a symbol. And in the public's eyes, that symbol had now been weaponized. William, despite his silence, found himself portrayed in nationalist media as the latest face of unwanted royal overreach, an English prince seizing sacred Highland land in the dead of winter. It didn't matter that the transfer had been Charles's decision, made with urgency and secrecy. The optics belonged to William, and they were damning. Inside the palace, theories clashed like steel. Some claimed Charles had orchestrated the transfer as a preemptive move, anticipating an imminent Scottish referendum that could splinter Crown property holdings. Others whispered that the king had been pressured by unseen forces, either diplomatic or personal, to move Balmoral into William's hands before questions could be asked. But the harshest theory of all came from within Charles's own circle, that he had acted out of fear. Not fear of Scotland, but fear of time. Time running out on his reign. Time slipping through his fingers. Time, perhaps, linked to something no one outside his most trusted confidants knew. What followed was unprecedented. For 2 weeks, King Charles disappeared from public view. Official statements cited rest, privacy, seasonal respite. But insiders knew better. This was retreat, not rest. Charles had gone silent in the very moment his voice was most needed, and that silence allowed chaos to fester. Meanwhile, inside the palace's legal chambers, the atmosphere turned frenzied. Barristers debated whether this confrontation marked the beginning of a devolved monarchy, a splintering of royal authority from north to south. Could Scottish legal structures begin to erode the monarchy's hold on inherited estates? Could Balmoral, once thought eternal, be dragged into the hands of political brokers? The fear wasn't abstract. It was real. And it was growing. And in this moment of storm and silence, a single image captured in the Scottish Highlands shattered the illusion of secrecy. One photo, one expression, one symbolic object. A journalist captured William holding an antique key, standing before Balmoral's main gates with a subtle smirk. It was never meant to be released, but once it was, the world asked the question: is this the new king in all but name? The image, snapped from a distance by a freelance photographer stationed near the estate's southern entrance, was meant to be harmless. A routine shot of the Prince of Wales arriving at his new custodial residence. But within hours, that single frame ignited a wildfire. William stood tall, the key, glinting in his hand, a relic passed down through monarchs, never before seen in public. His expression was serene, composed, yet undeniably proud. It wasn't a formal portrait, it wasn't posed, and yet it conveyed everything. Authority, ownership, inheritance. The internet didn't hesitate. By morning, the hashtags were trending globally: number king in waiting, number Balmoral gate, number the quiet coronation. Inside the palace, chaos erupted. The image had breached the dam of silence the crown had tried desperately to maintain. The royal communications team scrambled, claiming it was a private moment, misinterpreted by media, but the damage was irreversible. Every headline, every broadcast, every political panel dissected the symbolism William, in the Highlands, holding the literal key to the kingdom. For the public, it wasn't subtle. It was seismic. The image appeared on front pages beside phrases like, "The king effectively installed," and "The power shift no one acknowledged." For royal loyalists, it was a confirmation of William's steady rise. For nationalists in Scotland, it was a provocation proof that English dominance continued to tighten its grip, even under the guise of ceremony. Camilla's reaction was anything but restrained. Though she refrained from addressing it publicly, multiple palace insiders confirmed that she erupted behind the scenes. To her, the image wasn't just poor optics, it was an arrogant display, a deliberate undermining of Charles's authority, and perhaps worse, her own. She had spent years carefully cultivating her role within the monarchy, and now a single photo threatened to recast her as irrelevant. She blamed William for seizing an opportunity he hadn't earned. She blamed Charles for handing him the tools to do so. But above all, she blamed the silence that had allowed this narrative to bloom unchecked. Catherine, in contrast, remained composed. She issued no statement, offered no commentary. But her office confirmed something that shifted the public tone yet again. The Wales family would be spending the full spring season in Scotland. To some, it signalled loyalty to Charles's legacy. To others, it suggested a subtle power play planting roots in the estate they now controlled. As always, Catherine understood the weight of stillness. She let the world write its theories while she kept her focus forward. Public opinion fractured in real time. Some praised William's quiet command and his visible comfort in stepping into a deeper role. Others criticised the image as premature and performative, accusing him of stoking division in a time of royal fragility. Either way, the image stuck. The palace attempted to suppress it, issuing copyright warnings and takedown requests. But it was too late. The image had become myth, and while the image raged online, it was in the Balmoral drawing room that a centuries-old ritual was about to be revived. Behind closed stone walls, by the fire where Queen Victoria once mourned, a ritual not performed in over a century was quietly resurrected. With a sapphire wax seal, Charles confirmed what no press release dared state. Balmoral was no longer his, and in that flickering moment, history changed hands. The room was cloaked in silence, thick with unspoken emotion, as the parchment was placed on the oak table, aged, ceremonial, and final. This was no press event, no staged farewell. It was a private reckoning, attended only by those bound to the crown by blood and duty. Charles stood with shoulders slightly hunched, the lines of the past year carved deep into his face. Beside him, Anne clutched the family ledger she had fought to preserve, and opposite them, William held his breath, the weight of inheritance pressing down like a second skin. The Duke of Rothesay Herald, draped in ancestral tradition, handed Charles the sapphire seal, an artifact untouched since 1855, last used when Queen Victoria formally confirmed Balmoral as her sovereign stronghold. With a single press into blue wax, the transformation was complete. The document bore a title never before used in modern monarchy, Custodianship of the Northern Lands. Its tone was austere, final, and laced with the subtext of abdication, an act not of retreat, but of passage. Charles did not speak much, but his gaze met William's in a moment heavy with generational grief and reluctant surrender. Anne's eyes shimmered, not from sorrow, but from the ache of inevitability. She, perhaps more than anyone, understood the language of legacy and the toll of transfer. The act was not about politics, not anymore. It was about preparing the next guardian before the hourglass ran dry, yet it was impossible to ignore what wasn't there. Camilla's absence loomed over the ritual like a shadow. She had not been summoned, nor informed. Her exclusion was no longer subtle, it was institutional. Whatever unity had once existed behind royal facades had fractured beyond repair. This was not just a ceremonial passing of property. It was a deliberate reconfiguration of power, held tightly among those Charles trusted most in the end. And for Camilla, whose influence had long been contested, the exclusion spoke louder than any crown. As the final document was placed into the royal archive, a chill settled across the chamber. This was no coronation, no speech-laden transition, but its impact echoed with similar magnitude. Charles, still the king in title, had performed a symbolic passing of the flame. Not in Parliament, not before cameras, but here, in the ancestral heart of the monarchy's northern soul, where lineage outweighs law and silence binds stronger than any oath. It was done. The estate was William's, the legacy redefined, the past sealed in sapphire and sorrow. But even as seals were set and silence was sworn, one voice could no longer be kept quiet: Catherine. She hadn't spoken publicly in weeks, but the Duchess of Rothesay stepped into a Highland chapel and delivered a message that echoed through the corridors of power. With calm fury and unwavering grace, Catherine revealed the emotional truth behind Balmoral's transfer and the burden her family now bore. It wasn't a press conference. It wasn't a televised address. It was an Easter morning speech, brief and poised, but charged with enough weight to halt speculation and silence divisions. Standing before a small Highland congregation nestled in the shadow of Balmoral's hills, Catherine's words peeled back the political fog and revealed what so many had overlooked. This wasn't about land. It was about legacy. It was about what the monarchy chose to preserve when everything else felt like it was slipping away. Her voice, though soft, cut through months of chaos like a blade. She began, not with legal jargon or titles, but with memory of Queen Elizabeth II walking Balmoral's gardens in the final autumn of her reign. She spoke of laughter echoing across the loch, of traditions passed not through ceremony, but through presence. And then, Catherine did what no royal had dared. She reframed the entire narrative. Balmoral is not an estate, she said. It is our northern soul where silence reigns louder than crowns and duty feels like home. That single sentence reframed every leaked document, every photo scandal, every whisper of division. In a single breath, Catherine took a story of secret transfers and buried deals and turned it into something sacred, something shared. She thanked Charles, but not with hollow formality. Her words acknowledged his quiet sacrifice, his choice to step aside in a moment few could understand. His Majesty acted not in haste, she said, but in hope. For what is legacy, if not the courage to let go while still holding on? The chapel, filled with only a handful of loyal attendees, was silent as she spoke. But outside, the message detonated. News outlets picked up the speech within minutes. Analysts who had torn into the palace for weeks now pivoted, calling her tone measured, regal, even restorative. Catherine had not only protected William's position, she had restored Charles's in the eyes of many. But it wasn't just a speech, it was a vow. She confirmed that the family would not treat Balmoral as a retreat of convenience, but as a living sanctuary, that they would protect its silence, its spirit, and its sovereignty. No pageantry, no political maneuvering, just purpose. And with that, the firestorm began to settle. What had once been seen as a backdoor transfer was now cloaked in something deeper, a torch passed not just from monarch to heir, but from memory to mission. And yet, just when calm began to return, a final twist emerged from the king's own private physician. It was never about land, never about power. Hidden in a medical envelope marked urgent, monarch confidential, was the reason Charles moved in shadows. His health had worsened, and as spring bloomed, the Dart king who once walked Balmoral's hills with youthful vigor now prepared for something far more final. The truth had been sealed tighter than any state document, confined to private corridors, and whispered in medical terms only a few dared repeat. But when the physician finally arrived at Balmoral with a letter meant solely for William's eyes, the last veil lifted. The diagnosis was clear, irreversible, and brutal, in its quiet finality. Charles had known for weeks, perhaps months. Every decision, every deviation from royal tradition, now made sense under the harsh light of mortality. The castle transfer was not a political maneuver, it was a farewell. Anne had known, Edward too. Both had kept their silence, honouring Charles's wish for dignity over panic. They stood by, watching the storm build around Balmoral, knowing full well the thunder had nothing to do with inheritance and everything to do with inevitability. Their restraint, once questioned, now stood as testament to their loyalty not to the crown, but to their brother. Camilla's rage, once seen as entitlement, suddenly twisted into something else entirely: fear. She had not known. She had been shut out, not from strategy, but from pain. And in that pain lay the root of every desperate attempt to reverse what had already been written in ink and in illness. William's role, once complicated, became clear. He had not been crowned, but he had been called. Balmoral wasn't just passed to him. It had been entrusted, and with it came a vow, one he and Catherine made not in ceremony, but in resolve. They would protect more than just the walls of a castle. They would guard a memory, a man, and a monarch who had prepared for the end not with spectacle, but with sovereignty. In private, in silence, in the place that had always meant the most. And so, the narrative of Balmoral shifted. What began as a battleground of suspicion, secrecy, and succession ended in quiet continuity. The Highlands had seen a transfer, not forged in conquest, but in care. Balmoral remained royal, but more than that, it remained personal. Its silence no longer meant concealment, it meant peace, for Charles, for William, for the monarchy. And so, beneath Scotland's ancient skies, one castle changed hands, not in fanfare, but in love, legacy, and looming finality. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.